The ultimate test would be data that we don't have. We hear a lot more now about body cameras on police officers. I'd love to have a body camera on every kid sent to placement to see how people talk to them when they're in placement. These are adolescents, and we send them to places, and we have this language that we use. In this room, we talk about therapeutic models. But I think when you're talking with an adolescent, as soon as you use the word therapy, you've lost ground. I wish we could change that language. There are other language that we use which makes it harder. We've gotten hooked on using this term risk. We do risk assessments, and this is a high-risk young person. I don't know why any judge or prosecutor would go along with a diversion agreement when the kid has been described as high risk. I wish we could call them like highly vulnerable to future law enforcement contact. Something that would imply there's a social dynamic in communities. We use these risk assessment tools, which by and large are based on variables which are controlled by the system. So we have the probability of arrest, we have the probability of placement, the probability of charge, the charge itself. We pile that all into a statistical model, and then we look, we can predict the future law enforcement contact and processing. All we're doing is saying these are the young people that we like to arrest, that we will probably arrest in the future. And so I like Dr. Cahoman's description of, yes, life is unfair. How many teenagers say, well, that's not fair? I remember saying it. And to teach them, yes, life is unfair, and we are here to try to help you survive that, to function in an unfair society and to make your way. That makes a lot of sense to me. And that is at root of a lot of models that we call various kinds of therapy. But let's stop telling youth and families that they're in therapy. That's one of my suggestions. Call it something else. So whether the system's working or not, I would love to have that body camera to see what kind of faces they're looking at all day and what kind of sentences are being delivered to them and how condescending it could be and infantilizing and dependency forming. Instead of instinctively thinking that a young person that has contact with the police must be broken somehow, why don't we assume that they're in a situation that they need help to get out of, and let's build on their strengths. I know ACS is very interested in collecting more data on positive outcomes and success, as Commissioner Franco said. So if we could have more data on success, I think we'd be able to say more clearly and accurately whether close to home is working. Right now, all we can say is that after we started shifting the pieces around on the game board, it didn't all go to hell. That was one of the worries, that, as we said here already, when we start closing down access to state facilities, judges will panic and start to overcommit, overdetain, increase the probability of placement. That doesn't seem to be happening, and that's a good thing. And you have to understand the other side of the bench. So my late father-in-law spent more than 30 years being a juvenile court judge in Michigan. And I remember having these conversations with him, and he would say to me, you don't understand what it's like for us. Like, I'm sitting on the bench, and I have this 13-year-old young woman in front of me who is running around with this 18-year-old boyfriend who is at risk, who's staying out all night. The family's freaked out. I have to do something. And ordering yet another community-based placement is not going to do it. I'm afraid for her safety and her life. I have to do something. And I know I have this placement setting that I trust the people there. They do good work. I think she'll be safe. And you have to understand that impulse that all of us have. The downside of that is called child saving, where we start thinking about every kid like that. And, I have to save them all. I have to get them off the street. And that's how you blow up the system and create mass incarceration. So somehow there has to be check and balances to know whether we're using placement appropriately. And once we decide to use placement, what's it like for that young person and that family? Are we really building assets and strengths and reintegrating them back into the community? Or are we just turning them into professional patients? And I don't know anyone that has that kind of data. New York has a lot of data problems that we need to work on. But we are far from being able to say this works.